Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Ask the Knights Live. I am your host, Baron Logan Pathwarden. Thank you so much for coming out and seeing us tonight. We're always happy to have you. Tonight, again, we have two fantastic guests, two knights who some of you may know and some of you may not, but I guarantee by the end of the night you will love them. Before we get started, though, we have to do our due diligence and warn everybody that this is not a show for children. Yes, we will use offensive language. It just happens. We're very, very sorry. But if you have some kids out there and they want to watch, we tried to keep it down to a minimum, but I just want to warn you, it could happen. Also, this is our own show that we do. This is not an SCA sanctioned show. So the views and opinions expressed here are those of the participants and do not reflect any official policy of the position of the SCA Incorporated. As most of you know who have watched before, this show is nothing without its audience. The first half of the show, it's all my boring questions, but the second half of the show, well, those questions will all belong to you. So get into the chat, get those questions in. Cal, our fabulous tech, will be pulling and picking and choosing, so make sure you get them in early. And you don't have to send just one. You can send as many questions as you like. The more questions you send, the more likely it is that we will get to one of your questions. All right, so I think that is all the stuff that I have to basically say. Oh, on those questions, don't forget to add in your SCA name and title, especially your name, because you have to give me a chance to screw it up. That's the whole deal. It's what I do. So without further ado, let us bring in our two fantastic guests this evening. And here they are. We've got Sir Justus and Sir Tash. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you for having us on.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you could join us this evening. So before we get into the nitty gritty, how about we get you guys to introduce yourselves and give us your full names and titles and all that kind of good stuff.
Hello, I am Sir Justus de Tyre. I reside in Atlantia currently. I will be relocating to the Middle Kingdom pretty soon in the next couple of months. So that may be a bit of a surprise for some of you, but it's also a surprise for me. And I am lucky enough to have been a knight for about 15 years now.
Sir Gaius Tascus Severus Fabianus, which is a really long, complicated way of saying I'm Sir Tash. I've been known as Sir Tash since long before I was in the SCA, and adopted a Roman name that sounds kind of like it, but not at all. But I'm known as Sir Tascus in society. And I live in Atlantia. I've been a knight for about 18 years. But, it's still fresh. It's still good. I'm still doing it. I just turned 58, so must be something going right. And I enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, gentlemen, for being here. I have to say, to Atlantean Knights, it's pretty cool. I actually started my SCA career in Atlantia, the fabulous barony of Marinus, many, many, many moons ago, before I left Virginia and wandered all over the world. And as a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, I will be back in Atlantia just for a visit. All my family lives there. So actually, some of my very favorite people in the entire world are in Atlantia right now. But nobody wants to hear that crap about me. What we want to hear about is you. That's why we have this show. So our traditional starting question is, how did you get started in the SCA?
Well, the truth of the fact is I didn't start in the SCA. I started as a two-chuck. I was at University of West Virginia, and I had done a little bit of something LARPish like Dagger and a few other groups, and found out about this group called the Two Chucks and went and howled at the moon with them and did some stuff that I thought was truly insane. And I enjoyed it a huge amount. and ended up moving into Atlantia and became very good friends with several of the fighters here in Atlantia. Started going to some SCA practices in Atlantia. And it got to the point where I was going to 2-chuck events once a month, and I was going to SCA practices 3 times a week. So that transitioned kind of naturally. And soon enough, I was living in a house with other fighters so we could fight each other in the backyard. So I guess I fell kind of hard. So that's how it happened.
I won a radio contest for a month of free karate lessons. And I was excited about this. I was always interested in karate. I'm the Karate Kid generation. So I joined this dojo. I enjoyed the practices very much. Being poor and young at the time, I could not continue the lessons. And at the end of my month, the sensei, Doug Kempton, who's in the SCA known as Killian of Golden Sea, who's an outstanding gentleman. He said, well, I'd love to have you stay in the dojo, but I can't have you on for free. Why don't you come check out this thing that I do that is free? It's called the SCA, and we put on armor and we hit each other with sticks. And I said, sure, that sounds great. I got to continue to hang out with him, Doug Jarvis, also known as Nazir, another great gentleman. And those 2 guys brought me in. They helped me make all my first armor. They took me to my first events. They really facilitated it. And we have a lot of newcomer outreach in the SCA. I always tell people, how did you come in? And they say, oh, my friend drugged me in, kicking and screaming. That's how you get in the SCA. Someone brings you in. So those guys brought me in. And once I got started, I was hooked. So I started in Callantyre, bounced around a lot, and I'm currently in Atlantia. So that's me.
That's awesome. I always love to hear those stories. Now, Sir Justus, I have to admit, when you said that you won a radio contest, I thought the next words out of your mouth was it was for voiceover work. Because you've got a really good, very, very good voice for radio. And that's not an insult. Like,
I have a face for radio as well.
Face for
radio. Awesome, gentlemen. Thanks for sharing that. So now we know a little bit about how you got in. What keeps you coming back?
It's the people. And this is all I've ever known. I grew up in the SCA. I was 16 when I first started fighting. I had to wait to get authorized by the Earl Marshal because, being a minor, I had to have special authorization. So I fought for over a year before I had a chance to authorize. It's everything I've ever known. I've absolutely grown up in the society. I know that there are good generals like Tash's daughter, for example, who literally grew up in the SCA from the time they were infants. But from the time I can remember, from the time I was a grown person, I've been in the society. And pulling up to an event, that excitement is still there. When I see Troll, when I see people walking around, when I smell the campfires, when I hear the drums, when I'm pulling up to that event, it's as exciting now as it was 25 years ago. And I miss it when I'm not there. So to me, I can't imagine not being in the SCA. I can't imagine this not being part of my life. And it's been difficult as I've made such a big part of my persona and my existence being a fighter. As I've dealt with injury, showing up at events where I can't fight has been very difficult, but I still miss it and I still do show up.
The people also, so you travel around a lot if you can in the SCA, go to a lot of different practices in different places, meet a lot of different people. And then there are certain large events where you kind of see those people again. So there are people I've been seeing on a regular basis for 30 years for no more than 2 or 3 days a year. And, but I'll go to their camp and we'll share some food. We'll tell some stories, catch up a little bit. And then another Penzik or another Gulf Wars, we'll do it again. And we look forward to seeing each other. And we kind of, it's a long-term kind of weird relationship with a lot of different people like they beat me up. I don't understand this. There must be some kind of, there's some psychology that's probably really bad, but that's what it is. You enjoy fighting these people and learning how well you've progressed against them, how well they progressed against you. and then catch up and do it again the next year. It's a Groundhog Day of 30 years.
Both of those great answers. Really, really interesting. So before we get into some of our other normal questions, I want to talk to you both about, injury, because we were talking about before the show started. Both of you have had some injuries. You have a long and storied career in fighting, and each of you has had to work through some of those. And you were also discussing some of the things that you're doing to make sure that you don't injure yourself again when we do get back into it. So I just wanted to ask you if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your injuries and how you are getting yourself back into fighting shape, and also the preventative stuff that you're doing before we can actually get back out on the field again.
So when COVID started, I was doing, like a lot of people, tried to do some Pell work early on, and then got concerned that because when you practice, you have feedback. So when you do work on your Pell and then you go to practice, you kind of, this was working, this was not. And what you definitely don't want to do on your Pell is get some bad practices going and then reinforce them for a solid year and then go back and find out, oh, I've been doing something really bad for a year. So I stopped doing that and started doing a special set of exercises I do to a Tabata schedule that has kind of active stretching in the motions and, more importantly, loading tendons that I know tend to give me trouble if I don't practice often. So there's nothing like helmet time for working whatever components of your body you need to do what we do. Unfortunately, we haven't been having helmet time for a year. So I have basically a weighted baseball. It's called a tap bell. It's a weighted baseball bat, 7.6 kilos. And I swing it around in a variety of two-handed motions that I have to stop. And because I'm going over and around the head, I'm working these soft tissues and tendons that are the vulnerable tissues. When you do these offside shots, you're leaving the skeleton of your body, going to soft tissues. And if you overpower or throw out of alignment, you mess up those soft tissues. And then you start having recurring injuries, and it becomes a really nasty cycle of inflammation recovery, and you just never get out of it. So I try to exercise those tissues so I don't get into that cycle. And I've dealt with, everyone's had it, they call it tennis elbow or golf elbow. You might as well call it swordsman elbow, because we've all had it. And we've all dealt with how difficult it was to get out of it, whether you were doing some twisting exercises or lifting up a little ruler with a small weight on the end of it, and just suffering just picking up a cup of coffee in the morning, or putting your arm on this windowsill. You realize that this is stuff that you just don't want to go through again. So I start exercising and stretching to make sure I don't have to do this yet again. That's pretty much it.
So for me, I started fighting when I was very young. And when we're young, we're made out of steel and an especially tough leather. And we can take anything and bounce up and party all night and get up the next day and fight. When I was in my 20s, I put on a lot of weight. At one point, when I got knighted, I weighed 315 pounds. And this is in no way, shaming the bigger bodied guys. I was that guy. But when you're doing everything that we do and you put on armor and you're running around and doing heavy physical activity and you're carrying around 100 extra pounds, you're doing damage to yourself. And I did a lot of damage to my body, my knees especially, and they were the first to give out. So the first big injuries I had were knee injuries. I blew out my left knee several times, and that really stalled me. When I did that, the process of getting back into fighting, I realized I need to lose this weight. I need to lose the extra 100 pounds I've been carrying around, because now I'm getting into my mid-30s and my late 30s, and I just can't perform. I need to lose the weight. So for me, that was a big part of it. Shedding the extra 100 pounds I was carrying helped me a lot. I will say it did not help me in breaking through shield walls, as the first time I went and fought after I had lost all that weight, and I charged the corner of a shield wall and expected to barrel through like the Kool-Aid man, like I'm used to, and I bounced off like a super ball and hit the ground, was a humbling moment. But you learn better techniques. So for me, being in good physical shape is a key. That has not helped me, however, as I've had a number of successive injuries. Carrying all that extra weight put a lot of strain on my back. And at one point in the last, I guess 8 years, I ended up pretty much breaking my back. I got to the point where I had a spinal compression so severe that I was losing sensation in my legs and I couldn't stand up. And I thought that was the end of my fighting career, because if I can't walk, I'm going to have a hard time fighting. I've had 7 back surgeries since then. They've replaced all lower vertebrae and discs with a titanium cage. And that puts a damper on how you fight. It puts a damper on how you train and how you move. So a lot of guys end up coming to the SCA later in life. We're making nights later and later. And that physical fitness, having a baseline physical fitness, good cardio, good strength training, can help you avoid those injuries. For me, again, I break myself. I tore my bicep off my radius. I broke my back. I broke my knee. All these things I did to myself. I've never actually had an injury aside from, I've broken my fingers, I've broken my elbow, I've broken things that I've gotten hit. Those heal quick. Those long term, I've been fighting overweight for, 25 years. It takes a toll. So I would very much recommend, keeping a very good eye on your physical fitness, keeping your weight manageable, working within your own parameters. As far as injury prevention, strength training is good. People frequently ask me, what's the best exercise to be a good fighter? Fighting, period. Always, it will always be fighting. It will always be getting to practice and regularly doing the things you do when you fight. Holding the shield up, balancing a heavy helm on your head, holding your arm in fighting position. Those things are difficult to train, right? But you can do auxiliary strength training that helps you build the strength in those muscles and your core strength and your back and your knees and all that. But yeah, so as we deal with these injuries, especially as I get older, I started to understand a lot more about how important it would have been had I started that job earlier, had I started taking better care of myself 20 years ago, so that I would have prolonged my fighting career. I still might have gotten hurt. I don't know. But I know that a lot of the serious injuries I've dealt with were my own fault. I did them to myself. There's that.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%. Self-awareness is really, really important. And it's one of the things that you just said that reminded me of something that I've been doing just in the last month and a half, because I was fixing my helmet, fixing the chin straps and making sure the padding and everything was okay. And I put it on. And I noticed that it felt different, not just because of the new chin strap or the padding. And I realized that it was the weight. I hadn't had my helmet on in such a long time that it felt heavy again. So for the past month and a half, 2 months now, I have been at least every other day, I just put my helmet on while I'm, searching YouTube or watching a show or whatever, and it just, slowly turn my head back and forth, up and down, trying to rebuild all the muscles in my neck that I used to have when, we fought a lot. So that's one of those things, like I'm actually kind of worried about folks when they go out. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of injuries just from not doing these things like we used to. But I'm really worried about necks. I know that sounds weird, but I'm really worried about people not being used to wearing their helmets anymore. So
I'm a big proponent of, when you're doing Pell work, especially, your arm harness and your helmet. You don't need your knees. You don't need your left arm. You can use a shield. But wear your helmet. You move differently. You're used to supporting your weight differently. When you throw that shot, you're used to stopping your helm rotation. So at least your helmet and at least your arm harness. If you're just out there, naked, you're not practicing how you fight. And practicing how you actually fight, I think, is key. So I think that goes a long way to that. Wear your helmet, put it on, get used to that weight. And it's not just a static weight. Sure, wearing it is good around the house, but stopping that weight when you lean out, that all triggers. So yeah, I definitely wear my helmet when I do pel work. I definitely wear my arm harness. Everything else, it could be naked to the breeze, but those things are important to me.
And also worth mentioning that neck strength is also one of your key defenses against concussion damage. The ability to connect yourself to your body so that the mass of your body is being moved instead of the smaller mass of your head helps you makes your memory a little better 10 years later.
Yeah, I've had enough concussions in my life, and none of them from SCA fighting. So that brings me to another question that's not on our list. I want to talk to you guys about armor and the importance of armor, especially for new folks. How do you suggest someone, because there's been a lot of people out during the pandemic who, they got their stimulus checks, but nobody's going out anywhere. Like they finally get all their bills paid, and then they've got, an extra little bit of money. So they're like, I'm going to buy armor. How do you suggest that a new person or a person who maybe has been fighting a while, but is finally getting their armor? How do you suggest that they go about it? Like what could you tell them before they purchased anything?
Well, it's always wise to go to eBay and find something that says Viking, LARP, Norman, Chinese, and Dragon. If you've got all of those, you've got all your bases covered. You can't go wrong because that armor that's Game of Thrones like level armor. You can do it. Obviously, you need to find an experienced fighter who you can show them this gear and is this legitimate, or am I buying a piece of tin armor from Iberia that is actually meant to be stood in the hallway and laughed at? You need someone who understands what that armor is. You also need to understand the armor of the area you're in. Some areas don't need a 12 gauge or a 10 gauge helmet. Some areas do. You also need to appropriately armor yourself for what you're going to be doing. Are you going to be a combat archer? Are you going to be a shieldman? Are you going to be a spearman? Those are different armor choices. You need to be, do I need gauntlets or do I need a shield basket? So you need to find someone, latch onto, is it a really good idea that I armor myself up in this barbarian outfit? You might need some advice on that because maybe that loincloth isn't quite up to, might not make it.
Neo, if you're watching, he's talking to you.
I'm glad you had Tash go first. I am the last knight in the SCA to talk to about armor. I frequently get accused of being a pad boy, which is not fair because I'd have to wear pads in order to be a pad boy. And I wear as little as I can get through the marshalette with, because that's a dumb idea that got put into me early in my SCA career. I would say, when you first start fighting, you're going to be wearing loner armor and it doesn't fit right and it doesn't work for you and it's uncomfortable and it's miserable, right? And as you start to collect pieces of armor, you start to understand, oh, I like having my knees, not around my waist. I like having them on my, resting on a shin ball, for example. You create that armor. It is so much easier now to find both good used armor because we've got, 60 years of the SCA. A lot of helms have been made. 25 years ago, the best helm I could find was a spun top round 12 gauge helm that spun around my head every time I got hit. It is easier now to find good quality stuff. So as things move on, there's a lot of stuff you can build yourself. There's a lot of stuff that you can buy. There's a lot of stuff that you can have people help you make. and fighters will help you make stuff. They want people to hit, therefore they will help you get in armor. Your helmet has to be your chief investment. It has to be heavy. The weight of your helmet is part of the protection. And that's something that, until recently, we didn't even really realize. In the last 10 years, the research that's been done on CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, where repeated small blows add up. And we're understanding that now. And I wish I'd known that 25 years ago. Because the weight of your helm, when you hit a bowling ball, it drops straight down. You hit a wiffle ball, it flies off. Same thing. The weight of your helmet is protection. So you want a heavy helm. You want a helm that protects you. And I'd say if you cannot buy anything else, buy a really good helm and armor the rest of your body. Because getting hit in the head repeatedly is dangerous. And we know that now. So I'd rather you spend $1,000 on a custom-made, beautiful helm and have carpet armor than have beautiful stainless steel and titanium lamellar and a cheap helm. So make sure that helmet is worthy of the kind of sports that we do. As far as arming the rest of you, yeah, Tash had great points. What's your persona? What are you doing on the field? Are you a melee fighter? Do you only fight melees? You can afford to wear less armor. You're going to get hit once in the day, twice in the day, 3 times in the day. Are you a heavy tournament fighter where you might get hit, more times in the day? And I know I'm going to get hit a lot. Yeah, I put on every piece of armor I have, which is still not very much. But I want that extra protection on my legs. But if I'm going to enter a tournament, I'm going to get hit twice, maximum. And then I'm out. So I don't wear a lot of armor. But that's my personal choice. I've paid for it in injuries over the years. But yeah, your head. Spend your money on your helmet. Get a good helmet.
Absolutely. And that's one of the great things about this day and age is, you can spend $1,000 on a helmet.
I think we might have frozen.
And no, you're still good.
I'm good.
Okay. So you can spend $1,000 on an absolute, piece of artwork of a helmet for your head. But you can also spend $500 and get a historically accurate helm that is really, really good. That's one of the great things about having all of these new armorers out there. Like, it's munitions grade, but it's not that spun top anymore. I had my Ashcraft Baker spun top Saleh, and I was happy for it, and I loved that it got me on the field. And I think it cost me $100 when I got it brand new. But did I wish I could have had like a nice bassinet? Well, even munitions grade bassinets at that time were like, $700-800. I was a little E2 with no money whatsoever and a family to feed. So I'm that really makes me happy about this day and age where you can, reach out, talk to armorers and get yourself a good deal. All right. So we'll get back to my regularly scheduled questions here. We're actually just about at our halfway point. So we'll do this one and then we'll do our commercial break. So what do you think was your personal biggest hurdle as an unbelt? What do you think it was that you had to overcome in order for you to become knighted?
For me, it was moving. I was in the military when I got serious in the SCA. And moving every couple of years will put a dent in your progression because it takes a while for a kingdom to take you in and accept you and to start building that reputation. And about 3 times in the 11 years before I got knighted, some friendly knight would pull me aside and say, hey, we've been watching you lately. You've been doing really good. You're winning tournaments and, you're on the right path. We're thinking about you. And then I'd get my orders and I'd move to a new kingdom and I was the brand new guy.
I've been there.
For me, it was one of those, it was every time I'd show up in a new kingdom, it was, show us what you got. And then, perfectly understandably, a kingdom that receives a new fighter and he's a hot stick and he's winning tournaments, they're not just going to knight him. They want to know him. They want to meet him or her. And they want to know if they are quality chivalric candidate. So I don't blame any of the kingdoms that I was in, West Kingdom, Aitenveld, Meridies, all the places I moved. I totally understand why they were waiting to knight me. I wasn't ready, but I was close. And so what happened is the first time I settled down somewhere outside of the military, I went on the normal progression. And if you look at somebody's, order of precedence entry, you feel like you can get an idea of their career. You're like, oh, they got their AOA in 86. And then, 5 years later, they got their GOA and then they got knighted. I got my AOA and my KSCA 1.2 years apart from each other. So if you look at that, wow, that guy was just a rocket. He got his AOA and he got knighted. What a stud. Now, there was 11 years. I was nobody, no awards, no nothing. And then I settled down somewhere and it all caught up to me. And then I got lucky enough to get knighted before I started having some serious injuries. Because, if I'd gotten that knee injury 6 months earlier, we may not be having this conversation.
Absolutely.
Two things. One, my job, which I've been fortunate enough to do for 31 years now, involves television politics, covering politics, which meant every 4 years I was on a campaign trail, and I was missing events those years. I usually missed Pensick that year. I was not at the big events, so I would disappear pretty much every fourth year. So that kind of became this guy's back. Let's start again. That was one, but the more important one, and I think the one that's best for most people, is a sense of you are responsible for your own success. And what I mean by that is, for a long time, oh, that guy blew off my blow. Oh, that guy's a rhino hide. If that guy was more honest, I would have won this. You're giving power to other people when you are thinking of yourself as a victim, that someone else's actions are holding you back. You need to take away that power. You need to make that your power, where I will be able to hit them harder. I will be able to get around. I will be able to make them so miserable that they will have to submit, whatever it takes. Or I'm not going to be bothered by it if that guy doesn't take my blow, and that's on him. But you need to take power of yourself, of your own successes. And you don't blame your failures on other people, whether you think they deserve it or not, because essentially you've taken away your own power. And I think that's important. When you feel others are holding you back, you're actually holding yourself back.
That's really well said. And I appreciate both of those answers. I'm very funny and similar parallels between the two of you and myself, but that's something we'll have to talk about off air. Because right now it is time for our commercial break. Our wonderful friends over at Trade Winds of the Levant have become our official sponsor of this show. And so, without further ado, let's take a look at what they have to offer. All right, we are back, and now we have the best part of the show. Every week, it's the questions that our viewers send in, and we've got some really good ones here. And I want to start off with this fantastic question from Duke Sean from Artemisia, our good friend. Um, he's a avid watcher, and he says, "Sir Justice beat my ass at Gulf Wars in 2010. What advice do you have for fighting people of renown without getting wrapped up in fighting their reputation?"
That is very gracious of Duke Sean. The easy answer for that one is I did not know who I was fighting. I was ushered over there by a friend of mine, Matthew of Kal-bardr, and he said, "Hey, I want you to fight this guy." And Duke Sean is one of those very humble dukes that doesn't wear like huge Duke paraphernalia. Like, if I remember correctly, there was nothing on his helmet. There was, white belt and gold chain. So I knew I was fighting another knight. So of course I brought my game to him, but I didn't know I was fighting the Duke Sean. And I know that had I known that, it might have affected my fight. It seriously might have, because I knew that he's a great fighter. I knew that he has a lot of renown. And had I gone into those pickup bouts knowing you're fighting Duke Sean, I might have had a harder time. But since I didn't know who I was fighting a guy in a blue tunic that I wanted to beat, right? So, yeah, it's funny because this ties in with some other comments I've seen, like the weight of the chain and who you are. Let's look at that fight with Duke Sean and I. I had nothing to lose. If I go into that fight and Duke Sean beats me, I lost to Duke Sean. Big deal, I don't have to hang my head about that. He's a great fighter. He's a world-renowned fighter. I'm a nobody. I'm a brand new knight. So if I lose, no big deal. He's got everything on the line every time he fights somebody. Because if he fights somebody and there's some no-name and they best him, then, oh my God, Duke Sean lost to this nobody, right? So there's, to me, the weight is on the other fighter. The weight is on the more experienced, more renowned fighter than it is on me, because I was just a hedge knight from the sticks that just got knighted, and he's the great Duke Sean. And personally for me, I didn't know. When I do fight somebody of great renown, I've been lucky enough to fight Duke Paul. I've fought all the Dukes in Atlantia. I'm bringing everything I have because I want to win. I have that desire to prove myself. It's not intimidating to me because, again, as the lower tier fighter, you have nothing to lose. If you lose, big deal. You lost to some great Duke. If you win, then yeah, I bested this Duke. But keep in the back of your mind, always keep in the back of your mind, yeah, you bested this great Duke on the pickup field at Gulf War, not in a crown tournament in his home kingdom with his consort watching, right? Keep that in mind, because, would things end differently if it had been in his home kingdom with his consort and the whole kingdom watching? He might have brought a little bit more. So always keep yourself humble like that. Remember that just because you beat somebody, so what? They're a Duke for a reason. It's not easy to gain that title. It's not easy to gain that renown. And yeah, you won. Awesome. Take pride in that. Don't feel like you're now better than them, because you're not. You bested them. There's a lot of things that could have happened. Did he fight 20 fights before you? Are you fresh? Are you 20 years younger? You don't know. So keep yourself humble. Remember, yeah, you bested him. Good job. Press higher. Keep pressing higher.
So I don't have a Duke Sean story. So no,
Well,
I've actually met him at Gulf Wars. I'm kidding.
Well, the question is do you have any advice for fighting people of renown without getting wrapped up in their reputation?
So in general, obviously a crown tournament, a high pressure tournament is a different thing than just meeting on the field. But in general, I try to clear my head and actually just have no thoughts in my head whatsoever. I feel like I'm doing my best if I can just, like, there's an empty wind going through my head. I don't want to be thinking. I want to just be reacting. Thinking happens beforehand. It happens afterwards. But I try very hard to actually just clear my head completely and not let any of that get in my way. Yes, there is some thinking that actually does happen. Like if I can get this guy to go for this sucker shot at my leg and hit him in the head, yeah, that'd be great. There is some thinking going on, but I do actually try to clear my mind as much as possible for the very same reasons, because you don't need those extra, oh, blank blank is watching me. Now I want to be nervous because I'm worried about what someone else is thinking about watching me when I'm not pretending I'm not being watched. So yeah, you got to clear your head. And that's my key. Try to clear your head as much as possible. And that includes that fighting that person of renown. You're trying to forget that you're fighting a special person. You're fighting a person.
Well said. Excellent. Oh, and there he is, chiming in. We love Duke Sean. If you haven't watched SCA Coaches Corner or his special series that he just finished, What Makes a Night, go back, and they're all on YouTube, all at KK Productions. Some really, really good stuff in there, not just for beginners, but for people well along the path as well. Just really, really good stuff. Okay, so we have a question from the Honorable Lord Thorin from the East, and he asks, what made you choose the persona that you did?
So there's a certain romance to, I'm doing Fall of Rome. Sir Gaius Tascus Severus Fabianus is actually a 4th century Roman, but is he Western Roman? Is he an Eastern Roman? Is he in Britain and he's been abandoned by the Romans? He's kind of a leftover. That fall of the Western Empire is a romantic time for me. It's kind of the age of Arthur, the age of Britain. Is it the Dark Ages yet? The people at the time don't even know that the empire has fallen. Frankly, we shouldn't even say the empire has fallen, because there's this Eastern Empire over there. They've been around for a long time. They're going to be around for another 1,400 years. But nonetheless, you have this kind of mists of time where civilization is falling. There's this thin line trying to hold it back and keep it together. There's a romance to that. And that's why I've chosen that persona.
I was very young and impressionable. When I joined the SCA, I had a Japanese persona. I was Yoshi Akagi. And I was going to go Japanese because that was my interest at the time. And then earlier in my career, maybe my second fighter practice, I was at a post rebel. And I was hanging out and having a great time. That's what the post rebel is, what sold me on the SCA. The fighting that I saw that day, we all know that sometimes SCA fighting does not look grand and epic. And that day it did not look very grand and epic. And I was not impressed. But the post rebel, where people were singing and having a grand old time, I was like, oh, well, if this is what we do after events, then I am part of your society. I am you. And at this post rebel, I was hanging out and I was doing my thing. And all of a sudden, everybody got excited. It was like Jesus and Elvis had showed up. And this very handsome guy walks in and he sits down in the corner, and a circle formed around him as if he was a guru or some holy figure. And he took out a drum and he started playing. And people just sat there and listened to him and sang along and gazed at him as if he was the Messiah come again. And that was Duke Kal-bardr. Hugely popular and famous Duke from Palantir. And I was like, I want to be that guy. What's his persona? 12th century knight? I will be a 12th century knight. Where's he from? He's from the Middle East. I will be from the Middle East. I modeled myself on that person because I had this huge fanboy crush on this guy because he had it all. He was a duke and he was renowned and everybody wanted to be just like him, including me. So I abandoned my Japanese persona and I became a 12th century crusader. I was going to be his squire. I was like, I will be squire to this person. And then he moved out of kingdom. But yeah, it was all because I had a fanboy crush on Ducon McNeil. That's why I'm a 12th century knight.
There could be worse people to have a fanboy crush on. All right, so our next question comes from the Honorable Lord Caspian Blackaroon. Thoughts on getting into a good headspace for tourney, especially if you're not competitive by nature?
Everybody you're fighting wants to win, and you want to win. You want to give them your best. And for me, I love to fight. I love to fight. I learned to love to fight as I grew up in the SCA. And this ties in because I wanted to add something to my question of what kept you from becoming a knight. What I should have said was actually more important than me moving around was my temper, because I had a very bad temper and I didn't mind losing. I didn't like losing when I thought it was unfair. And I would get very angry, and I would get very, very angry. If I thought I hit somebody and they didn't take it, man, that I just felt it. And sometimes more than once, perhaps at one champions tournament where I showed my posterior in front of the entire assembled royalties of the known world, because I lost my temper and I started yelling at the guy that I thought had wronged me. I was taken aside and I was told specifically, if you do not get your temper in check, you will never be a knight. And I took that seriously. And that was not the only time that I had been taken aside and said, your temper is out of control and we will come down hard on you if you don't learn to take it. So at some point I realized it doesn't matter. If I hit them and they don't take it, it's not on me. It's not my honor at stake. I hit them, and if I lose this fight, I don't care. As long as I maintain my own integrity, my own honor, I don't lose my temper, and I fight for the love of fighting, it does not matter if they take my shots or not. So if I go out and I fight well, and I fight as well as I can, I don't care if I lose. I don't care if I lose to an unbelt or a duke or anything in between. If I gave it my all and I fought a good fight and I enjoyed the fight, I let it go. So going into a tournament, do I want to win? Sure. I love to win. We all love to win. It's fun. But going out there with the best intent, giving your opponent the benefit of the doubt, fighting your best fight, giving them what you've got, and having fun doing it. It doesn't matter who wins. My favorite tourney format is something that I developed with the help of Tash and some other people. I honestly don't remember who wins those fights because they're so much fun. It's not about who comes out the victor. It's the actual sport and love of the game. So when I go into a big tournament, am I nervous? No, I'm not. I'm genuinely not nervous. Even in the finals, I just want to do my best. And for me, because of my anger issues, because of my own problems, if I take a loss and I keep myself together and I say, my Lord, you won this fight, I've won kind of a personal victory over my own anger and anxiety and own personal demons that continues to this day. I do have to keep an eye on it because I got a bad temper.
So if you ever watch high-end sports, baseball pitchers, hockey goalies, you'll notice that they do little rituals. If you watch a pitcher, they have elaborate little rituals where they scrape their feet a certain number of times, make a certain number of motions, check these places, and then they finally throw that ball. If you watch hockey players, especially goalies, they do the same thing. They have little rituals that they perform, and those rituals put you in a headspace. Find a ritual that you can do each time you're using the Pell, each time you're at a practice. It could be just the way you salute your opponent. But that ritual is something that sets your mind in a normal place like your Pell or like your practice. And now when you perform that ritual at a high-end tourney, your mind is going back to just the normal set of itself. We build muscle memory when we work on a PEL or when we do practice. The whole reason why you go through so many practices and do your 10,000 blows or whatever the number is because you're building up muscle memory. Well, that muscle memory is also connected to your mind. And if you connect that feeling of ritual to your mind, you can clear your headspace and make this just another day, another fight, rather than the big crown tourney.
Well said. Very interesting, gentlemen. Okay, so we have another question here, and from one of my favorite people. This is Lady Runa from Merdier's. Man, I always say that wrong, and Cal always wants to beat me up, but I always mess up names. It's part of my brain weasels. So, what diverse arts and courtly entertainments have you studied? Are there any particular non-combat skills that you think all gentles should pursue? Wow, there goes my tongue.
So back in the day, I did actually do some dancing. It was one of those things that we were told we had to do, and I actually found I kind of was liking it. I like telling stories. I don't do a whole. I can actually play guitar, but I don't think I've ever done it at an event. I used to do a lot of flamenco guitar, but I've never tried to do that at an event. I like telling stories. I like to try to bring a narrative to an event, be it a historical narrative or literally a no shit there we were story, which is just traditional good fun after an event. In terms of courtly arts, these are kind of things where I don't think I pursued it for court. I think there are things that just happened naturally. Like I had to learn how to make my own garb because I just really couldn't afford buying my own garb, and hand sewing. And then I started embroidering patches. I'm not wearing one right now, but I have a Roman tunica, and they have very, very elaborate rondelles embroidered onto it. And I did that by hand. So for some reason, I decided I needed to learn that to make this tunic because it'd be cool, and I didn't have $500 to spend on that tunic. And then I had to make the belt, and that belt had to look really nice. And so now I'm learning some leatherworking. And then, my armor, I really can't afford some good knees. I'm going to have to start making my own armor. And soon enough, I'm making my own armor. The helmet behind me I made. It is a kit helmet, but I still made it. Lo and behold, you find yourself being pulled in new directions in the SCA all the time. Your baseline interest quickly starts branching off. It is quickly a tree. It is no longer a sequoia. It's some kind of vast oak tree. And you find yourself learning new skills that you never would have dreamed. There was a time when I thought, oh, sewing, why would I ever do that? And then lo and behold, I'm sewing a lot. I'm custom making, stitching on my gambeson, and so yeah, this is how you progress into things. And it isn't necessarily because I was trying to be courtly. It was because as you're inspired by others, as Justus was earlier inspired by someone who came in and played a drum, that inspiration kind of rubs off, and then you find yourself getting these new interests and doing these new things.
Yeah, so I can honestly say that I wanted to be a great bard before I wanted to be a great fighter, because that was what I saw greatness in. I had never seen Khan fight. I had seen him sing and entertain a crowd. So I was like, well, I want to do that. That looks like fun. Like, I love what he's doing and how he has this mastery of his art. And he's very good, and he writes his own songs. And I want to be like that. So for me, just like everything in the SCA, never do something for the award. Do something you love and be awarded for it. So if it's fighting, don't fight to become a knight. Fight because you love it and because you just have so much fun doing it. And if you pursue that and you're lucky and you don't get injured and things go well for you, you get recognized for it. I can honestly say I never went to a fighting event. I never did anything for my knighthood that I would not have done outside of my desire to fight. I love to fight. It's fun. It's fun for me. The same is true with any art you do outside of your primary skill. So in this case, it's a fighter. Do we have a checklist? when we're talking about candidates, yeah, we'll say, does he have service? Has he served his group? No? Well, somebody tell him he's got to do some service. Does he have an art? No, he doesn't do anything. Somebody teach that guy how to sew, because we do look for that. And I wish that we'd get the message out that, like, look, you're a fighter, right? Yeah. Well, what do you like to do? Well, I kind of dabble in woodworking. Cool. We do woodworking in the SCA, and you can learn how to do medieval woodworking, and you might even enjoy it. Oh, you don't enjoy woodworking? Do you like to play the drum? Yeah, that's kind of cool. We have drumming. Do you like to do calligraphy? We have calligraphy. Don't do something just to check a box. Really don't, because it won't be fun for you. But find something that you enjoy and translate that into the SCA, because I guarantee you, whatever it is you like to do, there is an analog in the SCA, and you can pursue that so that you have something to do when you're not fighting. And that was kind of me. Like, I started fighting because I needed something to do before the Bardic Circle happened. And then I learned that I loved it, and that became my main pursuit. And then Bardic became this thing that I did for fun. It can be the same way. Don't do something just because you need to check off that box. Figure out what it is that you'd like to do. Find somebody in the SC that's amazing at it and say, I would like to learn from you. I want to learn how to make armor. I want to learn how to be a scribe. I want to learn how to do falconry or woodworking or archery or equestrian. There's so much. You don't do it as an elective. Like, I need to do this to get my white belt, so I'm going to learn how to play the doom belt. Don't do that. Seriously, don't. Find something that's interesting to you. Somebody in the SCA is a master at it, and they can teach you. So do that.
Unfortunately, Lady Runa, we do not have time for songs because we're almost to the end here, and I've got one more question that I have to ask these fantastic guests before we get out of here, and that is, of course, is there anything that you can suggest to our audience that helps you, something that you use, a book, a music, movie, television series, anything that helps you get into that medieval mindset, or when you're working on a project, something that you put on in the background that just gets you there? Anything that you could suggest?
I'm a musician, and music absolutely speaks to me. It was not hard for me to dedicate myself to the Bardic arts. And for me, the SCA is fighting all day, finding a fire pit, singing all night, do it again the next day. That's my SCA. Do I do woodworking? Yeah, I do calligraphy. I do leatherworking. I do sewing. I do a host of activities. But if you could make me choose, fighting, fire pits, and singing, that's what I do. So for me, I love to put on compilations of recordings I've made, or stuff that people in the SCA have published, like Master Effenwall, that have put out there, because when I hear those songs, I'm there. I remember that time that I sang that song with Master Effenwall, and it was fun, and it felt good, and the fire was there, and my friends were with me. And when I hear that song, I remember that time I sang it with him. Or I listen to Khan sing a song about valor and chivalry, and it just makes my blood sing. So for me, it is stuff that the SCA has made for the SCA. I love listening to Bardic compilations. I love listening to live recordings of Bardic circles. I love listening to things that people in the SCA have produced. We have some incredibly talented songwriters and singers in the SCA. Mistress Rosalind, Lady Elisha Beth. These people are amazing, and they are worth seeking out. So yeah, for me, it's very music based. When I want to get inspired, when I want to feel the SCA again, I put in a CD, and that takes me back to that fire pit where I got to sing alongside those amazing gentles.
It's honest, but it's going to sound trite. Unfortunately, Camarilla, O Fortuna, like, it's straight from the Conan movie. It's straight from the movie Excalibur. Those were the movies I was really into. Excalibur was right there when I found actually the two Chucks and the SCA. And that was the endless repeat song on the car, literally on the car radio, 8-track tape, cassette player, whatever it was. As we were pulling in to an event site, that was the thing that we had to crank up and just go crazy for as we pulled into an event. Yeah, it's not sophisticated, but it still brings back that feeling of we're here, we're at the event.
Awesome. Of course, I always have to mention my sibling show, Between Two Peers, because it's amazing. They're still on their summer break, but they have a whole back catalog of interesting people to go back and see. The SCA Coaches Corner we mentioned earlier, and What Makes a Night are also good. There's also a couple of shows that my tech guy does. I can't remember. He does like a show, 2 shows. I don't know. They're all boring. No, I'm just kidding. What You're Playing Wednesdays. He's also does, God, Cal, how many shows are you doing now? Like 16, 17? I don't know. He does. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Fantastic Fringies, a brand new show. Yet another show that Cal is producing is coming up on the 18th. So make sure you're tuning in for all of that good stuff. Help you keep that medieval mindset. Hey, we're only a few months away, folks. So I'm going to say, go get vaccinated, wear your mask, wash your damn hands. Don't be an idiot, because I miss you. I miss you all. I want to see you again. And more importantly, I want to hit you with sticks. No, I'd rather hug you than hit you with sticks, but I really want to hit you with sticks too. So do everything that you can to get us all back to normal here. And if you like this show, if you like any of our KK production shows, please feel free to go over to Patreon and help us out a little bit. Every little bit that you can give us helps us get things like new earphones, new cameras. It keeps paying the bills for services like StreamYard, which is what we use to put on these shows. And it keeps us from going, poor by trying to keep you guys entertained. Also, you can go over to Redbubble and search KK Productions if you want a Ask the Night sticker or any of the other 2,000 other shows that Cal produces. And that'll help us out a little bit too. We really appreciate you guys coming out and watching. More importantly, we appreciate you coming out and, oh, yes, we got 2 nightly things, blankets and sheets. And we also, it's really important to have on your bed. But we really appreciate your questions and your comments throughout the show. Thank you all so much for watching. Without you guys, we would have nothing, and we really do appreciate you. Gentlemen, thank you for being on, because without guests, I wouldn't have anything to show these fantastic folks out in the audience. Thank you for coming on and being a part of this tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody. That is the important announcement that I forgot. Okay, so unfortunately, for the next 2 weeks, you will not see this beautiful face. We will not be doing Ask the Nights live for the next 2 weeks. I am taking a very much needed vacation, but we will be back with episode 50 in just a couple of weeks with some more important announcements about the show and the SCA and all the amazing stuff that we've got coming up for you. So if you can stick it out next week, go back and watch one of the past shows that you may have missed, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you all for watching. Good night, everybody.